Buenos dias, buenas tardes. Thank you for joining us, wherever you are, for this wonderful session on leadership and its advancing equity with a Latino lens in a time of uncertainty. I am joined by three colleagues, Ann Kress, President of Northern Virginia Community College, Juan Sanchez Muñoz, who is Chancellor of the University of California, Merced, and Frank Wu, President, Queens College, part of the CUNY system. Welcome, colleagues. Nice to have you with me today. So I think all of us know that institutions of higher education have faced some challenges, sometimes challenges that we have not faced before under conditions that we haven't seen before. And more than ever, I think we need to remain focused on the work that matters most, because we know that the students that we serve, the communities that you all serve, may be most of the most vulnerable people in our communities today. So the work, this is not the time for a break. This is not a time to slow down. This is a time to remain focused on what matters, to do the work with urgency, understanding that you have financial challenges. For some of you, it may be new. For some of you, is a continuation of what you have to struggled with in the past. We know the pandemic brought a whole new set of conditions where what was normal and traditional is not and probably will not be moving forward. And then a new light, a new bright light has shone on racial injustice and inequities, and nothing new, but something that needs to remain on everyone's mind as we engage in this work of providing access to opportunity and helping individuals succeed. And of course, we want to do that work through a lens of equity. So I thank you for joining us today for the panel. And I'll ask a question, and if you don't mind, I would ask you to go first. And when I call on you, please unmute yourself. So help us understand the context of your institution, what you've had to address, what you had to deal with, and how you have provided leadership in these very challenging times. I think it takes great inner strength, and it takes courage, and it takes determination and a commitment to the cause to do this work. So I thank all of you as leaders for choosing to lead during this time. So Anne, if you could help us understand at NOVA what you've had to face and how you keep supporting your students under challenging times.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you, Maria, for moderating this panel, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues as well. So Northern Virginia Community College is a 6-campus institution across about 70,000 students in Northern Virginia, so right across the Potomac from DC. And we're a large institution, we're a very diverse institution. We do not have a majority student population. About 25% of our students are Latinx or Hispanic. And so when we looked at the pandemic, so hold that in your mind, right? 6 campuses, 70,000 plus students, we decided on a Wednesday before students would have come back from spring break that we would move to remote learning. We gave all faculty a few days to adjust, and then everyone shifted to remote. We never would have thought we could have done that. And so we were very focused, I'm gonna say we were very focused on academic continuity. And so a funny thing happened is we started to hear from our students about all of these other needs that our campuses fulfilled, right? So our students, just to put in context, I think if you are not from Northern Virginia, you will likely think of Northern Virginia as a remarkably affluent area. And in many respects it is. But there are high schools in our region that have, above 70% free and reduced lunch. There are neighborhoods that our Health Foundation has described as islands of disadvantage, right? So that's where NOVA students are coming from. Before the pandemic, about 60% of our students went part-time, and it's because they worked in all of these sectors. So they brought to us this basket of needs during the pandemic. We turned our parking lots into Wi-Fi hotspots because even if they had laptops, they couldn't afford broadband. We figured out a way to donate the food that we had left on our campuses to local food banks because we couldn't have students coming on campus. And then we directed students to those food banks. We set up almost overnight a group of folks we called remote student support specialists to help our students. We understood very quickly that some of those folks needed to be bilingual. We also understood that we needed to connect with community-based organizations. So I think it really was sort of shifting this whole ship and understanding our job, no matter how stressful it might be, is serving our students. And our students look to us as a beacon of hope and consistency at a time of great uncertainty and fearfulness in their lives. And so that's what we've done. And now that we're sort of partway through this, we continue that work. And I know my colleagues have great things to share as well. So I look forward to hearing from them.
Thank you, Anna. I think what also people have been reminded of is that students are people.
Yes.
And people with lives, and that some of the challenges that we read about is about them too, because they may have had people in their families losing a job, and many of those it probably will be Latino families. So I think that the humanizing of the work has become even more critical now under these conditions. But yeah, thank you for sharing. Juan, if you wouldn't mind going next, please.
Of course. Good to see you again, Maria. Thank you for your service as moderator. And it's a pleasure to serve here on this panel with my colleagues, Drs. Kress and Wu, and a pleasure to meet you as well. UC Merced is located in what's referred to as the San Joaquin Valley, or the Northern Central Valley. It's essentially a region primarily known for its agricultural industry, but increasingly becoming more and more diversified in its economic base. The campus is just under 10,000. It is a member of the University of California, and there are always expectations of it being one of the best research institutions in the country. Most recently, U.S. News Report ranked the university in the top 100 public and private universities and top 40 in the public universities. These are the highest rankings in the history of the institution. UC Merced is only 15 years old. I tell people we're not old enough to have a learner's permit. And yet we're in the top 100 public and private, and top 40 or 50 public. The point I want to make is we are 55% Hispanic. So the university doesn't succeed and doesn't achieve those sort of metrics of recognition in the absence of Latino academic success. So I thought that just to give some context of the campus, recently in the last 4 years, the campus physical structures and footprint were doubled with a $1.3 million P3 partnership investment. We doubled the size of the campus in 4 years. It's the largest P3 in higher education history. And so again, with 54% Hispanic, we can't ever disabuse ourselves of the lens of Latino success at UC Merced. And to Dr. Kress's point about universities being a source of reliance, people turn to us for confidence, for stability, cannot be understated. So that's a little bit of the context of UC Merced, and a little bit of its history. Faculty are very young, very ambitious. We sit in a community of just under 100,000 between Fresno and Modesto. And so this is an area that's overwhelmingly Latino. Our campus reflects that demographic. Most of our students the majority come from the San Joaquin Valley and Southern California, Los Angeles County, and a little bit further south, and about 30% from Northern California. 99% of our students come from California. So when you look at the demographics of California, it's not surprising that our demographics represent a majority of Latino students. These are students that are overwhelmingly first generation. Over 60% are Pell eligible, somewhere closer to 70% Pell eligible. 2/3 of our students are first generation. And we're the only, to my knowledge, the only research university that has a 70, 60%, 70% Pell eligibility and a graduation rate in excess of 70% and a retention rate year to year close to 90%. So we have to look at our institutional viability through the lens of Latino success. I think what we faced, like everyone else, is this transition very quickly from a face-to-face residential university to mostly remote. We actually have about 4,000 beds on campus, but only just less than 400 students here in the fall living on our campus, mostly because for these students, this represents the safest, most conducive location for them to continue their education. Many live in homes with limited capacity, limited Wi-Fi bandwidth, limited privacy, some instability, multi-generational homes. As we all know, Latinos, our parents and grandparents live in our home. And so being concerned about making sure that they're healthy. So we hope to double this population in the spring. We currently have an asymptomatic, what's called surveillance testing regimen on campus. And we have a 0.06 or under 1% positivity rate at the moment. And if we can keep that, we hope to, again, as I said, double the number of students on our campus in the fall. Well, in the spring. Another issue that we're facing here in California, as our country knows, are the raging fires. And so many of our students come from communities where their friends or families or immediate family or friends or acquaintances are being displaced by these just unyielding fires. And the air quality, because we're in an agricultural region. Many families work in agriculture. They're exposed to certain, chemicals and what have you. Many have respiratory, pulmonary issues. And then the fires exacerbate that with all the particulates in the air. So, and then of course, the fear of the COVID, and then of course, the impact to the economy. Many of our families work in the service sector. So to Dr. Kress's point, I'm sure Dr. Wu, we're learning that the issue of food insecurity, home insecurity. So we have to be patient. We have to be nimble. We have to understand our culture and our constituents in English and Spanish and other languages. We have to be a source of consistency and a reliance for our students and their families. And let me just make this point and then end my comments. And we also have to understand that our young people, our Latino young people, students and their families are very cognizant of the social issues taking place across our country, are in deep solidarity with their African American communities, and are very concerned about what they see happening in our country, and are very interested in motivating a conversation toward greater social justice and equity. And we need to be cognizant of their fidelity to these principles as we create an environment where they can not only prosecute their own educational sort of ambitions, but be supportive of the concerns of the people in their communities that are not Latino and the concerns that they care about as well.
Thank you, Juan, and thank all of us have a responsibility to be concerned about what is happening in our nation to people in the communities that we serve and the communities that other people serve. And thank you for reminding us that the success of Latino students, you said is the success of the university. I'll say it's the success of the whole nation. So as Latinos succeed, we all succeed. Thank you. Frank, would you let us know the context of Queens and some of the challenges that you have faced as president?
Sure. So I just started July 1st. We're 99% online, and I only moved to Queens last week. So it's a crazy time to start, but if you want to be a leader, this is the moment to step up and to lead. Queens College is part of the City University of New York. We have about 20,000 students. We're incredibly diverse as a campus, and the borough is incredibly diverse. On our campus, we have about 80 plus languages spoken at the homes of our students. According to linguists, the borough is the linguistically most diverse place on the face of the globe right now. There are just more languages spoken in homes than you'll find in any other single geographic area. People say riding the number 7 train is it's the United Nations Express. You'll see people of every walk of life. We're very proud to be welcoming. We have, the CUNY system has consistently welcomed dreamers, for example, offering them the same tuition rates and tuition assistance program as other state residents. In terms of our demographics, we are also very diverse. We have a population that's about 27 to 28% Hispanic or Latino, within which there's a significant Afro-Latino population. It's about 27, 28% white as well, and about the same proportion, 28, 29% Asian American, and about 9.5% Black or African American. So if you look at Latinos, Anglos, and Asians, they're about even in terms of the student enrollment among the undergraduates. We're primarily a commuter campus. We do have one residence hall, but by and large, we serve folks who are living at home, and that's fine. That's part of our identity. It's a place where most people are not coming from backgrounds of privilege, but what our job is to lift them up and to give them that opportunity. So that's where I'm coming from in a literal and figurative sense. I'll just add, you know, everything has become so highly politicized. You may have just seen the most recent news, the Trump administration, in an effort to curtail using platforms such as this and online and virtual learning modes, is having accreditors not allow the extensions that they've had and the exceptions. So if you haven't seen this news, you have to work with your accreditor right away to get approvals. So it's a moment that's fraught. Everything we do, even beyond the health issues, just having a conversation with a stranger feels dangerous now, because you never know who might turn out to be an ethnic nationalist, your neighbor or coworker. And it's a time that we so much need bridge building. I'll end with this thought. You know, there's also backlash. There are a lot of folks who don't like the sort of work that we're all dedicated to. And what I try to point out to them is, when people talk in the abstract about what's universal and about policies and programs, you know, some of those policies and programs don't work for communities and individuals that face and continue to face historic structural barriers to higher education. But it's asymmetrical. If you remove those barriers, you not only help people who have been held back, that benefits everyone. So sometimes it turns out that when you address the situation that those who most acutely feel the pinch of economic anxiety or COVID-19, which, believe me, Queens certainly does. It was the area hardest hit early on, and we are slowly emerging from that. And when you help folks in need, you help others. But when you're abstract and universal, you sometimes overlook the very specific concerns that we're all dedicated to making sure that we address effectively. So it's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you. So I want to shift to strategies that you are implementing or continuing to support at your institutions. As you were talking about, Frank, the work matters, and yet there is always a question around the value of what we do, and yet you have people to serve. So moving from the abstract to a little bit more concrete, I know the work doesn't happen in isolation. The work can't be the result of the efforts of one person, in this case, the CEO of the institution. The work has to be done in partnership. So share with us what strategies you are implementing through a lens of equity that may have resulted in a change in policy and practices at the college, either as a result of the challenges that you're facing or as a result of your journey working for equity and social justice. So I'm going to stay with you, Frank, if you don't mind.
Sure, sure. I'll give you 3 examples, and they're oriented toward what's very practical. I think we sometimes overlook what might seem just administrative or not a big deal, but for those who have historically felt unwelcome or who face challenges just commuting, you know, I'm acutely aware so many of our students now it's risky to take the subway. They might have to take 2 different bus lines or even 3 and transfer twice. You know, it is not easy for them. So I'll give you 3 examples. The first is we have a real pipeline from the 2-year colleges in the CUNY system and transferring, you know, just the articulation process, ensuring that the courses are compatible. And even though we've made improvements, I can't tell you how many students still face issues that we have created for them and that we can resolve for them. Just issues, even if they're taking a course from one of our professors who also teaches at a 2-year college, sometimes the credits don't transfer, even though it's the same class, it's the same professor, it's the same book. It's just fallen through the cracks, and we're rolling out a whole new software system that will deal with that. Now, you might not think transferring credits is such a big deal, but if anyone's been through it, you get the runaround. It's discouraging. You have to go to office after office. And whether we mean to or not, people are being sent the message, you're not welcome. We don't want you. There's something substandard about the educational background that you're bringing to us. And that's just wrong because it's not the case. And we have to just make that whole process easier. That's the first example. Second example, it's on everyone's minds, it's the New York Times today. As we shift to online, remote proctoring and everything that we do creates material disparities. For some people, the invasion of privacy that they feel, having their photo taken, having biometrics taken, because of the history of government surveillance, you know, it resonates in a way that if you're coming from a background where it doesn't have that symbolism, you might think, oh, what's the big deal? Well, part of what we have to realize, even those of us who didn't come from privilege but have now achieved a certain comfort level, we have a nice apartment with a nice view and so on, we have to remember what it was like 20 years ago for our immigrant parents and grandparents when they struggled, because every one of these barriers, each one of them, it's not much, right? Every one of them is 90 minutes out of your life. But that 90 minutes, if you have to do it 2 or 3 times, and it adds up, because then you got to take the subway, you got to take the bus, and it's just these microaggressions, and some of it's bureaucratic. There isn't intention on our part, but we have to do better, and we have to be intentional in remedying it. The last example that I'll give you, third, is I really think we have to message explicitly, sincerely, and not just message, but back it up with action to counter the anti-immigrant rhetoric. It's just all around us. It's just so powerful, and it's political leaders. I won't name any names, but you know, folks who suggest that everyone of Latinx background is a rapist or a murderer. I mean, who just say that pretty clearly. Everyone of Asian background is a spy, right? And so on and so forth. There's just so much of this around us, and many of my students say to me they feel the American dream is dead, and I feel terrible about this, right? They're just so discouraged, and we need to be attentive to the mental health issues and the stress, not just students, faculty and staff. Boy, I think there is right alongside the pandemic, there is an epidemic that we're not seeing of people who, many of them probably clinically are depressed, and others, they're by themselves. They've been by themselves 6 months, and it's affecting their work. So even if we weren't compassionate, even if we didn't feel any empathy, as leaders of institutions that depend on these folks, we've got to figure out, how do we address this and put resources to it? So I'm oriented toward what's practical and looking at the things that every one of them by itself, it's only this big, but you add it up and it's a crushing burden.
Thank you. And I will tell you, for anyone who is leading a community college that may not be part of a system like CUNY, transfer is a key component of that mission, because for many of those students, those artificial barriers that we've had historically in place to keep people from transferring are impacting a lot of Latino students who choose to attend community college. And I hope you mentioned too the lack of civility in our nation. Some of those people are in our institutions too. So I hope that we all have the courage to lead with respect and to lead with civility and to speak up when things need to be brought to light. And sometimes that's not easy to do, but I'm assuming as the courageous leaders that you are, that is part of the work that you have, the responsibility that you have assumed. And I'm going to ask you the same question.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give two examples sort of at both ends of the student life cycle. And I think it goes along with what you said, Maria. I think part of what we need to do is to be smart enough to figure out how we can get done what we need to get done within the rules of the road, because sometimes changing that road takes a long time. And so I'll start with a program that we launched this summer at Nova in response to the incredible disruption that we saw that high school seniors were facing in their year. You know, they did not, in Virginia, instruction in the high schools was suspended for a period of time while the state sort of figured out the equity implications, which really put a halt to our dual enrollment programs in high schools as well. So we got together at Nova and heard from our school districts that they were very concerned about, you know, forget summer melt. They were seeing spring melt with their students, that these were students often from difficult backgrounds, from financial disadvantage that had only gotten worse throughout the pandemic. So we, within a span of 2 months, pulled together a program. We called it Jumpstart, and we threw it out there. We worked with our school districts, and graduating high school seniors could take up to 2 online college classes for free. We wound up having about 2,600 students. On average, overall, that population, 37% of those students who took the Jumpstart classes started at Nova in the fall. But when we talk specifically about Latinx and Hispanic students, it was 60% of those students. So we made college absolutely affordable because the courses were free. On average, the students got a little over a 3.0 GPA. They were among the most motivated. We heard from parents, we heard from students that this made a huge difference for them. We had to do sort of some behind the scenes mechanics because we had to live within state policy around dual enrollment, but it worked. And so we put it out there, and now all we want to do is keep doing more of it. And now we've got the counties to buy in. And so the counties will help us fund programs just like that. So I think, again, getting that idea, getting it quick, you know, throwing out there, supporting students. We also saw that, you know, just to give you a sense, at that point, 1,000 students still had not completed their FAFSA, and we helped them complete their FAFSA. So, you know, we have a lot of assumptions about where students are in their journeys, and we don't know the truth until we engage. On the other end, I want to talk a little bit about a program that I think someone on this call is familiar with, and that's Advance with Mason. And George Mason University, under previous leadership, President Cabrera and President Rawls, when he was at Nova, put together Advance, which is still going strong. And it is everything we've talked about. Credits are not lost. Students transfer all of their credits over. What's fascinating to me is that Advance has enabled us to achieve the same demographics in that population as we see in our community. So 16% of the students who participate in Advance are Hispanic. 16% of the students in our region are Hispanic. So we are mirroring the demographics of our population in this program. The students who participate in Advance, they're Nova students and Mason students at the same time. They receive coaching. The pathway is clear. There's over 100 and I think at over 103 different programs now that students can transfer over. They lose no credits. In many cases, they qualify for scholarships they never thought they could achieve. Now with President Washington at Mason, and here we're looking at even co-locating once we can come back to our campuses, some of these programs on Mason's campuses. So again, working within the rules, but figuring out how we can best serve our community by building in the supports that the students need.
Thank you. That's a great model. And there is no question that though partnerships between community colleges and baccalaureate granting institutions where students are co-enrolled or have joint admissions or have facilitated that transition of credit from one institution to the other, removing, as I said earlier, barriers that are sometimes more historical than necessary and part of the bureaucracy, they work. So I thank you for implementing that, and I hope that it grows with other partners in the area. Thank you, Anne. Juan, would you?
No, thank you. Now it's really, I tell you, just let me, just by way of sort of contextualizing my circumstances here, as I hear Anne and Frank speak about their institutions, it wasn't very long ago that I was at a university very much like CUNY-Queens. In fact, you know, Maria and I, we know Philo, the chancellor there, and I know that campus. In fact, I fly in and stay in Queens when I visit my son at the Merced Academy in Kings Point. And I knew Angel Cabrera before he went to Georgia Tech, and have come out and was at the P3 conference a few years ago, and they talked a little bit about the partnership with your particular community college. I was a community college instructor myself at one time early in my career, and so the point I want to make is so much of what you both are describing inform what we then do at a school like the University of California, Merced. It's inseparable, the steps that you're taking to counterpart institutions in our region. They're taking very much the same steps. I think that this point of partnership can't be understated in terms of how we help at a school. Yeah, I make the point that if we don't help, it's sort of like I used to say when I was at the University of Houston downtown, if we don't work with community colleges well, we don't exist as a university. If we don't work with our partners in the region well at UC Merced, we will not thrive as a university at 54, 55% Latino. And that includes the Cal States in our region, Cal State Bakersfield, Cal State Stanislaus State, etc. We need Fresno State. We need to have partnerships with schools just like the two you're representing. Partnership, effective communication. We need to have, to your point, Anne, we make assumptions about what we think students need. Even if we grew up, as Frank alluded to earlier, from modest circumstances, those were modest circumstances 20, 25, 35 years ago. Those circumstances have changed for today's modern students. So how do we communicate? How do we learn and listen from today's student population? And they think very dynamically. They think much more through technology. Okay, we need to have high touch. Even in this remote virtual environment, how are we contacting these students directly to assess where we can best intervene? Some ways things that we are attempting to do at UC Merced. I think it was Frank that alluded to, many of us are concerned about the well-being of students. So we're trying to, through UC Health, dramatically increase telehealth, telecounseling options. We've also looked at our financial aid to make sure that students aren't inaccurately being repackaged in such a way that would reduce the financial aid even as they work remotely, because many of them rely on these funds for various needs. I'll just leave it there. So making sure that there isn't some kind of detrimental impact to any financial aid decisions, making sure that they have access to tele-counseling, tele-advising, tele-tutoring, making sure that they're engaged with their faculty. One thing that I've asked for, because there's a presumption that at the UC, it's a higher achieving student, perhaps, but they come from the same families that are going to both of your institutions. How do we make sure that we're checking on our students, that they're engaged with their faculty? One high impact activity at UC Merced that has proven to be immensely successful is undergraduate research. Harder to do in this remote environment. So how do we continue the involvement or engagement with students and faculty in the absence of a physical lab? Another thing that we've done that many of you, I'm sure, are also doing is technology. Many of our students haven't the laptops, the bandwidth, the Wi-Fi, and there are limits to what you can do, and whether you put Wi-Fi capability on buses and drive it into their neighborhoods, and then even if they have it in their home, what if they have 3 or 4 or 5 people on it? Okay, and then what kind of policies, if they have to upload a document that isn't uploaded, what kind of policies for redress or waivers or reconsiderations do you have as an institution? Do we have as institutions, in the way I think Frank is talking about, and some of the things that we do that are self-inflicted? So again, I think partnerships, communication, understanding the finances, understanding the culture, understanding the home environment, working with those that are also providing our students to us, the Cal States in our case, the community college partners, and understanding the ecosystem of support necessary for our students. And I make this point on our campus, Maria, and I think it'll resonate with you. Yeah, I know your personality and drive as an education leader. I am tired of a deficit model of our students and of our campuses. And I'm talking about not just surviving, but thriving. We need to recover forward. And our students want that, they deserve that, and they have that expectation of themselves. Or from their circumstances, they wouldn't be in higher education. Given their modest circumstances, first generation, low income, they've made the choice to recover forward by virtue of their willingness to remain college sort of engaged. So let's not do them a disservice by having ambitions any less than they have of themselves or their families have of them. So what I'm trying to inculcate is an ethos, okay, a zeitgeist of thriving, not just surviving.
Thank you, and you're right. Actually, the work Excelencia has done from its inception is helping people shift from a model of deficiency to a celebration of what is based on data and based on best practices, which yesterday they awarded the Seal of Excelencia to new institutions. And of course, it's a big celebration of the things that do work. And so thank you for mentioning that, Juan. I wanna shift now. I have for those of you listening and watching, we have an opportunity for questions. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please put them in the chat space in the Zoom, and then we'll find time to address them. But I have one question for the panelists, and I'm shifting now to the humanitarian side of the work. So in times like this, with so much unrest and all of the things that we've talked about, that I don't want to be repetitive, but how do you lead with empathy, and how do you bring a message of hope to your college community and to the communities that you serve? And any of you can start. Anne, I'll call now.
Sure. Oh, I was trying to find my mute button. I'm sure many people wish I had a mute button, but I would say, we actually started this fall with a framework we called the 5 E's, and one of them is empathy. And we talked about how important at this moment grace is, and gratitude. And I saw someone wrote in the chat box that our students are so resilient, and they are. But I think we also need to have a place in our heart that remembers that they shouldn't have to be. We shouldn't say that the only way that students get through our institutions is because they're so resilient and they have so much grit. We should remove those barriers. And I think what this has taught all of us is that there are many more barriers than we could have ever imagined. And I can only speak for us at Nova, but the move to remote made so many of them manifest to us. And so one by one, we've been working to take them down. whether it's offering a biweekly pay plan for tuition, removing holds, loaning out laptops. I mean, just things that, you know, if you start to think about the supports that your students need so that they can focus on the important work, which is academics, right? One of our E's is excellence. We expect excellence of every student, but we also know that every student doesn't come prepared with all of the tools that are necessary. And that's what I think we should all come out of this with an understanding that we can do more and we should do more, because resilience shouldn't be a defining quality of our students.
And you could say the same for employees too.
Yes, absolutely.
Someone also wrote in the chat that the issues, Franca, that you brought up of mental issues, its employees and its students and a lot of people in the community and in the colleges would have a responsibility in many ways to support individuals to address some of those issues. So want to acknowledge the comment I read on the in the chat. Frank, please go.
So three points. The first is we're never going back. You know, people say to me all the time, "Oh, wait, when are we going back?" And we will bounce. We won't bounce back. We'll bounce forward. Time only moves in one direction. We are not going to wake up and it's, you know, February of 2020. That is not going to happen. There will be changes. The second point is we have a responsibility, right, to help rebuild. When I look at the borough of Queens, we're a major civic institution. We're not just a place where people come to go to school. We're an employer. We're a real estate developer. We offer cultural enrichment programs. So we need to help the mom and pop entrepreneurs who own the restaurants get back on their feet with training programs and everything that we can do. I see that as very much our role. Third, not everything that we've learned during the pandemic is bad. I'll give you an example. It would be better to do programs in person, right? I think maybe kids now, they'll get accustomed to interacting with their grandparents on a screen, and when they see them in person, they'll be startled. But for most of us, we'd rather see people in real time, as they call it, and in the same room. But there are advantages to this, right? One advantage is no commute time, no cost, right? And I've done so many programs now, probably everyone here has, where in the past, in person, if we had 50 people in the room, I would count myself a huge success. Now, you get 250, you get 500, because people can do this, they turn the video off, and I don't know what else they're doing, right? They're cleaning their office. That's fine. They're also getting some of the content out of it. And I think our courses will look like this. The big lecture courses, I'll bet what we see for something where we're offering 10 sections, we'll see 2 or 3 sections old school. You come in, you sit in a classroom, there's the sage on stage lecturing, right? Then we'll see some synchronous virtual options, including maybe for people who can't come to the to campus for the lecture in person, and they can do it this way. Then we'll see asynchronous virtual for the people who are working 2 jobs who we want to help. And what it will change is it'll be intentional. It'll be modular. People who miss a particular class can catch it later, or they can shift in and out. That's not a bad thing. I think that's actually an advancement. Lastly, I'll say we're seeing another divide in the world. There are some people, some leaders, some institutions that value empathy. They believe in the social contract. They believe in mask wearing. You know, when I wear a mask, yeah, it helps me, but mainly it's helping you and vice versa, right? It's the idea that we'll look out for one another, not just in rhetoric, but in practice. But what is shocking is some people don't even want to do the rhetoric, right? They want to embrace sort of toxic masculinity. I'm a tough guy. I ain't wearing a mask. And it's not just they're taking a risk for themselves, they're taking a risk for everyone and shifting that risk onto all of us. So I'm an optimist. At the end of the day, being empathetic isn't just the right thing to do morally or ethically. It's the smart thing to do. You're not going to succeed as a college or a business if you just lack an ability to connect to other people, because everyone will see that and they don't want to be someplace like that. They don't want to be around people like that, right? So this, over the long run, and not all of us are empathetic. I'm not, right? I'm learning how to be more empathetic and to do this because I recognize if I want to succeed, I have got to be heavily invested in all the students, the faculty, and the staff, and project that. And by definition, empathy can't be fake. This has got to be genuine, and people have to have a sense, all right, this guy or this gal is basically on my side and is going to help me with this. Otherwise, even in the classroom, especially virtually, you're just going to be a flop, just a total disaster, because people aren't going to get any of the content because they're going to be resentful about the way that you're projecting yourself.
Thank you. I've heard some people say that the crisis forced reform and changes at institutions that people had hoped would occur, but were hard to implement because there was so much resistance, so that people hope moving forward that there is no going back. As I don't believe there's a going back either, as you said, that some of these practices that are a necessity today because of the conditions actually remain the norm moving forward because people are more effective using them. And the same for the students. I mean, for a lot of them, the services that have moved online, maybe they can be online, and then you don't need to worry about transportation and childcare and taking a break from work to go to the college. So I think there's a lot of hope that some of the changes that are helping students succeed under conditions today remain part of the norm moving forward. Juan, let's hear from you.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. I tell you, it's really a delight to listen to my colleagues and the things that they're doing and contemplating on their campuses. It's really, so when you ask the question, sort of, how do you lead and during this difficult time? I tell you, I think I and others like me in these roles take great comfort and are reassured by the hope and optimism and professionalism of colleagues like Frank and Ann. I think in these positions, it's important to project the empathy, or at least our willingness to move toward that direction, to be flexible, to be nimble, to be responsive, to be patient. I think and it's very difficult to be that chameleonic in these roles. Because they can also be interpreted as you have the absence of sort of conviction. And yet these are very, very different times, and they require a different kind of leadership and vision. May I say servant leadership? And I couldn't agree more with Frank and Ann that there is no going back in terms of our pedagogical delivery sort of modality in the future. What this pandemic has unfortunately revealed is there are different methods of delivering content, and for academics, both the scholars and those that work on academic campuses, to work and to be effective. I mean, I'll just give you an example. Even Frank was talking about different kinds of sections in the future, face-to-face, asynchronic, synchronic, etc. I couldn't agree more. I think this is what's going to happen. And we're going to have opportunities to engage with colleagues in much more effectively and much more conveniently in the future, when now we can Zoom with 200, or in this case, I'm looking at 162 people that are participating in this conversation. And we're going to be able to work in a different sort of way with greater conveniency, nimbleness, responsiveness. I'll give you an example. So I'm drinking out of this coffee cup from my former university, Texas Tech. And a friend of mine who we worked together was a Dina student, Amy Murphy, who sent me a message during this panel. Now, see, I'm touching base with Amy after many, many years. I'm sure I'll get a message from her saying, how could you mention me? How could you, or Mike, how could you put me on blast? Okay, but this is what this new sort of tool is that is now going to be available to us in the future. So I think, how do we lead? I think we lead by reminding people that our mission doesn't change. that our values don't change, that the tools that we deploy for the purposes of the mission and the value will evolve as is normative in a culture of higher education and intellectualism, always evolving toward a better sort of approach. And so in some ways, again, for all the wrong reasons, this pandemic has forced this. It may force us yet into what I refer to and others, to a re-democratization of curriculi, and learning through some of these new instruments that we may have available to us. But I'll end with this. We have to lead, I think, with hope and with humanity, and an understanding that that hope and humanity expresses itself differently in different cultures and populations y diferente idiomas. So let's speak the language of our constituencies.
Very well said. Thank you. Thank you, Juan. So there's a question from one of the participants. I'll ask the panelists. What best practices have worked at your institution with difficult budgetary reductions? What significant pivots have you made that worked to help students during COVID-19? May I go to you, Anne?
Sure. So I'll take the example of the remote student support specialist. So, and it works on a number of fronts. So when we moved away from our campuses, the reality is we've got folks who work on our campuses whose jobs, if they're not on a location, are at risk. And so we made a very clear commitment to our community that we would keep them, right? That we understood that this was not a time to lose your job. That you had made a commitment to Nova and we wanted to make a commitment to you. And so what we did was we also saw this need that students, when they moved remote, some of them kind of went missing in action, and faculty members would say, you know, I haven't seen Anne in my class. So, you know, with no change in our budget at all, we were able to shift some of these folks temporarily into what we're calling remote student support specialists. It's been incredibly impactful. I think we have more than 80 at this point. They nudge students about enrollment. They nudge them if they haven't been in classes. They're not trained advisors. They're not, but what they are is they're sort of those folks who are keeping an eye on students. And it's been impactful across the board. It's helped our students. You know, going into this fall, actually our enrollment was up from returning students. One of the things we heard from them is it was very clear to them that Nova cared about them, that we were reaching out, and we cared about our employees because they're still with us. So I think, you know, those budget neutral, I will call them, success stories are going to be incredibly important going forward.
Thank you, Anna. That's a great point. Through the work I do with the Aspen Institute, I've been speaking and visiting virtually with a lot of institutions. And one of the things when I have student groups is that what you said is a common message from students, that word care comes up 100% of the time. Students feel people care because of what you are doing to reach out. In other places, they have deployed similar strategies so that every single student gets a phone call from everyone at the college to make sure that they're doing well and to make sure they understand, and if they need anything, the college will be responsive. But that sense of they care about me, that is what is right now resonating the most with the students that I've had the privilege of speaking with. Frank, would you like to respond?
Sure.
To?
So this is not exactly responsive, but it will cost you nothing. So maybe you'll want to do this. Because there's so much concern, and I'd be shocked if any of you didn't face massive cuts in your public funding. What we did was I asked our CFO to put together a Budget 101 briefing that he's giving to everyone, the faculty, the student newspapers, student groups, the deans, the unions, anyone who wants it. And it covers everything. We're being as radically transparent as we can be on the thinking that, look, if we show people all of this, there's some things that folks with PhDs who are incredibly smart in their discipline might not understand. I'll give you a couple of examples that, you know, when I was a professor, I didn't understand either. I'll give you one example of something. We are about to start renovating our soccer fields. Now, a lot of people are going to look at that. I've got 17 capital projects going. This was approved 5 or 6 years ago. Funding came from the city and the state, earmarked for the soccer fields. You might see where I'm going. It's a capital project. It's a capital budget. It's totally different. But I predict some people will look at that and say, what are you doing? Why are you renovating the soccer fields and yet you're making all these cuts? Take that money and put it to some other use. Well, that's not a bad idea, but I can't. It would be illegal, and I would get in a lot of trouble if I said, let me take these millions of dollars and give them out as scholarship. Even if we agreed that was a good thing to do, it's not like me buying a Ferrari. That's not possible. We have an operating budget. We have a capital budget. They're not the same thing. And just explain to people. So people also ask, well, can't you just raise more money? You know, our foundation board raised almost $1 million for a critical needs fund that's pandemic related. That's fantastic. But when I show them that all in our budget's $225 million, $1 million sounds like a lot, but that $1 million is one-time money, and it's really, I don't want to insult our donors. I'm so grateful they gave, but that $1 million is not going to fix the problem. Even if I were the world's best fundraiser, even if our fundraising team, and they're really good, tripled what they were bringing in, it wouldn't fix declining public support. So just showing people the numbers, which it was about an hour of work, 2 hours of work for the CFO and his team to do this. And every time they do the presentation, it's 45 minutes. So there is a cost in terms of time, but we didn't spend money on it, and it's paying dividends because people are now coming forward and saying, wow, I had no idea. And now we're uniting people to campaign for renewed public support, because that, at the end of the day, that's our biggest donor. And for every institution that's publicly supported, even as your public support goes down, that's still your single biggest donor.
That may be the best time invested at the institution. I am sure you will need to offer those presentations over and over and over through your tenure at the college. Thank you. Juan, anything from you?
Well, just a couple of things come to mind. Some of the investments that we've tried to make is to increase the number of instructional designers and people that can help faculty redeploy their syllabi effectively with the most current dynamic pedagogies, technologies, platforms possible. Everyone turned on a dime in a week, had to reinvent themselves as institutions. And for many faculty, particularly senior faculty, they had of course been delivering their instruction for many years with great affect. There are some disciplines, performance arts, the training in musical instruments, labs, that really are difficult to translate into a virtual environment. So having the appropriate professionals to work with faculty to translate their course in order for students to be successful was something that was very important here. We introduced this, our mascot are the Bobcats. Here's our hand, Bobcats. And they don't do that here in California. In Texas, everybody does it, right? You're the Horned Frogs, or at Angelo State, you're the Rams, or you're the Longhorns or the Gig 'em. But in California, so I'm bringing a little bit of that from Texas to you. So we're the Bobcats. And so we created this DEN approach for incoming freshmen. And DEN sort of another way to call them cohorts. Okay, well, we had to come up with something colorful. And the idea, these DENs would be aggregated around affinity groups or disciplines or majors. They would have a mentor, and not necessarily somebody highly trained, but somebody along the lines of Anne's description, somebody to nudge, somebody ask questions. Do you need some help? Are you engaged? Is there something we could help you with? I think that's very important, that high touch, and using technology to be high touch, high contact is very important. We, like many, have created emergency fund to help, in sort of exigent circumstances for students, small amounts, but these small amounts at the right junction are very impactful. They can make the difference between staying a student or withdrawing. And we know what happens to our students when they withdraw for one quarter or one semester. there's a high likelihood that they will not re-enroll. They may not complete, as Ann was saying, some document, some secondary financial aid verification form. It becomes overcomplicated. They're already overwhelmed with other issues in their life. So we need to keep them, ensure that they're engaged. And then finally, just one point that I think Frank has alluded to in his comments regarding the sort of the narrative around immigrants. I'm very proud. I think everyone in California and the University of California is very proud of our support of DACA students and creating resources that the DACA students could particularly apply for. I think that's very important. And then ending, in our case, I think it's important to have some demonstrable sort of goal that is very ambitious and successful, to let people know that these are difficulties. They are concrete, they are legitimate, but we are going to persevere. You are going to persevere, and we are going to continue to move forward in your education and as an institution. Whether it's the soccer fields in Frank's case, that's also a bit of a North Star. We're still making progress. In our case, we have been approved for just under 10 million for planning a new health science medical education, which has been an ambition of UC Merced and the Valley for a long time, a medical education program here. And we're going to begin to design to bring that facility and that education here to Merced. And it tells people, even in this difficult time, with the campus that's 55% Latino, we are not going to abandon our ambitions for you or your ambitions for yourself to be academically successful.
Thank you, Juan. I was thinking too, with that den you've created, also brings students together as a community of support. And we also know that that's really important in helping students stay in school and succeed. There's one question that I am going to summarize. We have a couple of minutes left, and it is an institution, University of New Mexico, El Centro de la Raza. It's an ethnic student center. They pulled money that they were not going to use for events and things that are not possible currently. And then they invested that money in creating emergency funds for the students. So the question is, have you done that on a larger scale? They were able to support a little bit over 90 students. And then how were you able to do that? So if any of you has an answer for that, then I'll give you the microphone, and then we'll close in 2 minutes. I see you know again. Yeah.
I'll put out there really quickly. We did that recognizing that there were some restrictions, is the word I will use, around using the CARES Act emergency aid funds. Our foundation stepped up and provided additional aid that we could direct students to. So we have been looking at uses of the funds we're not using for students, and actually we're looking at food insecurity as a good source of sort of investment of those dollars and closing those gaps for students.
Has anyone partnered with social agencies or entities like United Way or food banks to bring support to the students, to where the support can be reached in a simple way? Frank, I see you nodding to it, or Anne, one of you.
We have a food bank, and that's proven to be so important.
And we partner with Single Stop, and actually I think Dr. Villagrán Glover, who's our VP of Student Services, is on this Zoom, and she's working with community agencies about potentially bringing food delivery points to our campuses, even while we're remote.
When I was at the University of Houston, downtown Maria, when we first met, I tell you, we created a food pantry program. We created a scholarship program. That's what we refer to it as. And I tell you, I very much underestimated the demand. We did that right after Hurricane Harvey. Everybody, you might recall, but it was just as subscribed and continued to be more subscribed even after Harvey. Here in the Central Valley, we are in the highest category in the state of COVID restriction. So it's very difficult to move people. And one of the reasons that I mentioned the medical education and why that particular academic program is so valuable here is, I think Anne referred to sort of resource desert. The Central Valley is considered a medical education desert. We have among the lowest rate of medical professionals in California. And so because of the limited medical capacity in the Valley, it's very difficult to create some kind of facility where people can come in large numbers to procure food for whatever their needs are. But this is something that we have to look at. But there are other forms of other pantry support separate from food that we might have to think about how we provide our community, because we all know this, our universities thrive to the extent that the communities they are located in thrive. If our communities suffer, then we are invariably going to suffer with them. And so we are very much, right, inseparable from the health and welfare of our adjacent communities and those that live there.
Thank you. It is time. I could spend another hour just having a conversation with you. Unfortunately, time was limited and time is here. But I want to thank you for what you do. I want to thank you for your commitment to education, your support of Excelencia, and for bringing us a message of hope. The hope is in the work you do and reminding us that we need to look forward, that just because life changes doesn't mean that the needs of the students will change, and the colleges are here to support the communities. On behalf of everyone on Excelencia, thank you for what you do, thank you for who you are, and thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you.